In West Lothian, we've actually had an anti-poverty strategy for 5 years, and this year it was coming to the end of its life. So it was very fortuitous that we had an opportunity in this last year to actually take time out and to review what we'd been doing and to think about a little bit about, where we were going to go and what we needed to focus on. So we spent an awful lot of time actually in this last year listening to people with lived experience of poverty, listening to our partners, to organisations that are delivering. We had 400 people coming along to raising awareness of poverty workshops, and we've had over 700 people coming along to our rollout of universal credit, unfortunately. And all of those people were able to help us, to tell us what was happening at the front line, what were frontline workers hearing and seeing, what were the community groups telling us that they were hearing from people, and to go out into places and to use our network to make sure that we were really trying to get to every corner of West Lothian and hear what people were saying. Because geographically in West Lothian we have about 3 large main towns, and then we have quite a rural population as well. So it was important for us to hear all sides of that spectrum, and to use our partners and our partnership to actually have a think about what it is we want to do. And it was very clear to us that, despite, all the data and all the things that were being seen, that we needed to think about who we actually did want to work with. And we made a decision that it wasn't about looking at SMID areas, but it was actually about looking at households, and it was about thinking about who we wanted to work with. Obviously those that are working but not earning enough, and certainly in West Lothian we have quite low unemployment levels, but equally we have a great deal of underemployment, and we have an awful lot of low-wage families because we don't have good paid jobs, and they're not sustainable jobs. Because, for example, in West Lothian, the biggest employer is, in fact, the council. And whilst we're a living wage accredited employer, we are struggling to encourage and support others to do the same. That we absolutely get the fact that, some people are just managing, but it's not going to take very much to teeter them over the edge, especially considering we're at full rollout of universal credit, and we are now seeing people coming through our doors that we have never seen before, who are already struggling and in debt, and of course those who are just not managing at all. So we're very clear about what we wanted to focus on. And I think the great thing is that, while we were doing this refresh, it gave us an opportunity to actually look at the landscape and to think about our community planning partnership, our local improvement plan, and make sure that we were linking in with those priorities. Looking at all the other strategic plans, whether that was criminal justice, the housing transition plan, looking across the board at what else was happening and thinking, actually, we don't need to be doing all of this. So when the very first anti-poverty strategy that we had, it had 7 priorities and 30 outcomes. I mean, we were doing all things to all people, trying to be a bit of everything. And actually, what's happened this time round is we've got 8 outcomes, and those 8 outcomes are very clearly aligned to the Every Child, Every Chance action plan. It is about reducing costs. It is about increasing income. It is about making sure people have got access. It is about reducing stigma. It is about working with people and taking them with us on this journey. We're very clear in West Lothian that it is a community planning partnership. It's just not the council that's trundling along doing this. It's going to take all of us working together to do that. And as part of that governance, we're going to be reporting directly into the Community Planning Partnership Board, and that we have refreshed, if you like, and created an anti-poverty task force. And that takes membership from all of the community planning partners. And it's going to be led by councillors, because I think getting that kind of political buy-in is vitally important if we're going to make a difference. So the anti-poverty task force will actually be led by one of the deputy leader of the council, and there will be councillors represented from all of the political parties on the task force, in order that we get that collective momentum about us all working together for a common cause. As I said, we've only got 8 outcomes this time. That's a big relief to me, I have to tell you, after 30. And one of them, obviously, very clearly, is to reduce the number of children living in poverty. And one of the things that we found that when we were talking to everybody across the board about what it is that we're going to do over the next 5 years, having had a bit of a look out there about what we know, what we think that's coming towards us, all of the things that you've heard from all the other speakers. One of the things was clear that everybody was saying, well, What do we know that's happening in West Lothian? How do we know it? What about all this data? So we've created a poverty profile. So if you look at the back of the anti-poverty strategy, you actually see another 18 pages of data all about what West Lothian looks like in various shapes and forms, and asking everybody in West Lothian to work to that poverty profile. Let's not be guessing what we think we know. Let's be all using the same data so that we actually are all singing off the same hymn sheet. And that's been really widely accepted. And actually, particularly for our third sector partners, they very much welcomed that, because for them, quite often if they're being asked to do funding applications, they're trying to evidence things, and they're saying, where are we going to get that data from? How do we show this? Who's got that information? Well, it's actually all there. That's where you go to get the information, and that's what you should be using as your baseline. We have a practitioners group. And that is well established within West Lothian. So we have, as you would expect, all the usual suspects in terms of council services. But we also have all our local housing landlords. We have the credit unions. We have our CDFI. We have the clothing bank, the food bank, the Citizens Advice Bureau. I could go on and on. But they all come together on a monthly basis. And we look at, what our action plan is telling us, where we should be going, what are we looking at, what we need to focus on. And one of the things that, if we were to think about what were the challenges that we've been facing in this last wee while, there's, I suppose, 3. And the first one was feeling overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed when we were starting to look at the child poverty stuff. And that thing about thinking, oh my goodness, there's just so much to do, there's only us, how are we going to manage? And then beginning to feel fearful of actually the scale of the problem and how are we going to manage. And indeed, for some of our partners, very much that thing about, well, we're all facing cuts and we're all being, redesigned and to do more with less, and who's going to actually be here to deliver any of this? So starting to get really fearful and thinking, and how are we going to evidence it? And who's going to write the report? And oh dear, how are we going to manage with less resource? And then, of course, I think we started to become obsessed. We started to become obsessed about the fact that we had this report to write. And actually, we began to get paralysed. We couldn't actually do anything because every meeting that we were at, we were thinking about, oh my goodness, the report, and how are we going to manage it, etc. And it was really interesting, and I'll tell you this little story because I think it actually tells you something about how we just need to get a bit of perspective on things. In West Lothian, there had been some pilot work done round in schools round about period poverty. And as a practitioners group, we were looking about how do we extend that out? How do we have a look about how we help people who are not in education to get access to free sanitary products? And with no resources and nobody, any money, etc., how were we going to do that? And indeed, how would we report that back in the Child Poverty Action Plan? And where was the data? And all these things that I've talked about that we were getting our knickers in a twist about, really, to be honest. The food bank said, do you know what? We've got crates of sanitary products that are sitting in our warehouse. And then somebody else said, well, wait a minute, I could be doing with some of them. So actually the practitioners group were starting to think to themselves, we could do something about this. And we could get ourselves organised, but, would we not need to have a baseline? And we would not, maybe we would need a form to think about the impact and all this of it. And it was great because our expert by experience panellists said, could you lot just get on with it? And actually we did. And you know what was wonderful in all of that is we got on with it. And the food bank took the role of coordinating that. People actually, we're lucky in West Lothian that most of the organisations, we've all been around a long time, and we actually all know each other really well because we've been working together for a long time. So actually people started to write to me to say, Elaine, we could do with some sanitary products, etc. Can I just tell you the downside of that is every time I left my desk, when I came back, there was a bag of sanitary products. I think people thought I was personally delivering them, either that or I had a very big problem, one of the two. But the reality was that we got on with it, and we're actually doing that, and people are getting sanitary products. And the other thing about that is that we then had a bit of a think about, well, who's missing out on this? And we realised, in fact, that there were people going to the Scottish Welfare Fund who would be in a crisis and, who wouldn't, who would be struggling. And actually, what could we do to help that? And there you go. For a very little amount of money, we'd be able to give everybody that was accessing the Welfare Fund an extra £5 so they could get sanitary products. So some simple solutions, instead of us thinking all the time about, what we're going to be reporting and how was the impact and where was the data and where was the baseline. So reality checks about what we needed to do. But we have been doing a lot. There's been a lot going on. So whilst we're facing some of those challenges, and whilst I have to say I'm making light of the fact we are still obsessing about our data, we are still fearful about what we've got to do with diminished resources, and we are still wondering how we're actually going to report on that. But there has been a lot of work being done. You know, a lot of the things that you're hearing from the other people, and indeed all the things that you will currently be doing, you know, whether it's school hunger programs, whether it's you know, training people, whether it's about reducing stigma, all these things are good pieces of work that are already being done. But in West Lothian, we decided that one of the ways forward was to actually create an anti-poverty service, to bring our advice together with our benefits, with the school clothing grants, so that it was all in the one place, so that as a service area, particularly through the council, you know, that once you got into the system, and I'm not disputing the fact you have to get in, but, you know, if you're coming to the doors and you're looking for advice, and certainly in our advice services, we see 15,000 people a year, so that's a good start for us, that we could actually be much quicker, much slicker, much better at helping you get that support when you need it, and to make that seamless transition to getting your benefits and to automate that where it's possible. That, as I said earlier, we absolutely need the buy-in of everybody across the board. You know, despite the fact that I've got poverty in my title, I am not going to solely be managing to solve poverty in West Lothian. It's going to take all of us wherever we are. And the CPP board very clearly taking that on board and recognising that in terms of this is a major driver. It's part of their LOUD. They've already said that this is something that they need to do. So there was a joint presentation with the NHS, with ourselves, with food banks, talking about what we were already doing in terms of child poverty, what the Child Poverty Act meant, and what was their response to that, and how were they going to help and support us. We've reached agreement that in West Lothian, NHS will take the lead in coordinating the report, and that would help us to reach out to other areas. That we've already actually undertaken a child poverty mapping exercise, and this was an attempt for us, for example, to particularly look at our own councillors. And we took a paper up to council where we said, we've not mapped up everything that's happening in child poverty in West Lothian, but we've just looked at council services, and we've looked at the 3 drivers, and we've mapped what we're already doing to that. And that's helped us to start to identify some gaps that we've got in provision. And that was a really interesting exercise to undertake. And it was amazing. I mean, that was probably one of the times that I've been at council where I actually thought people were fully engaged and really asking really interesting and pertinent questions. And certainly afterwards, you know, a lot of councillors coming along asking about how they could get involved, how they could, you know, that they could be a bit more responsible and what they could be doing. So that was a really interesting thing to do. And certainly, last but by no means least, the Experts by Experience panel, who just, as I quite rightly say, just told us to get on with it and to stop talking about it. So for us, I suppose if I was to sum it all up, we are on that learning wheel where we've gone from we now know what we don't know to we're actually doing it, but we need lots of help and support. And so it's a work in progress. So thank you very much for listening.